Welcome back to the Neil Oliver Show. My next guest this evening, Molly Kingsley, had young children of her own during the pandemic and ended up so concerned about the impact the lockdowns, amongst other things, were having on young people, she formed the group Us For Them, which campaigned for schools to reopen. And Molly joins me now. Molly, do you have any confidence that the last 4 years have taught us anything? By which I mean, do you think if the next one happens, which we're told it will, that things will be different?
I have no confidence. And in fact, I think, OK, that might be a bit of an oversimplification. I think we have learnt on school closures. So obviously, as you said, where I came into this, I guess, was a campaign to get schools open. I really, really hope we will never close schools again. And I have some confidence that will be the case, at least perhaps save, you can imagine a situation that is so extreme and actually where children are genuinely so threatened that it is the right thing to close schools. We've always said that is imaginable. I don't think it was the situation we found ourselves in 2020. I do have some confidence schools won't be closed again. However, I don't have any confidence that in a similar situation where you have, millions of adults' health seen to be threatened, children perhaps threatened less so, I have no confidence that we wouldn't make the same decision to prioritise effectively adult health and well-being and safetyism over children. No, I don't.
Now, you actually put under my nose a piece relating to Sir Kevin Collins, who was the so-called catch-up czar, who the government tasked with repairing the damage. But he walked away from that position because the government was, as he found out to his horror, were not going to properly fund it. And there was a line that really struck me. All these things we could have done to send a signal about childhood, but we did nothing. We gave up. It was pathetic. That's strong.
I mean, it makes me so upset, actually, Neil, because he's absolutely right. Of course he is. But there were people, myself and colleagues included, Anne Longfield, the Children's Commissioner at the time, a handful of politicians. There were people who were screaming so loud about this for so very many years, and no one listened to us. And to hear Kevin was one of those people, I know, he did no doubt his utmost to get this recovery package pushed through. I think one of the things that Kevin talks about, which I find very powerful, and again, myself and Us For Them colleagues were saying at the time, is this whole language of recovery is very uncomfortable. The thought that you could close children's lives down, close their schools, take everything away from them, and somehow you'd be able to recover them. And I think, people like Liz Cole and I, one of my Us For Them co-founders, were saying right back in 2020, 2021, that we shouldn't be using this language because it gives a false sense of security that we can rectify what we're doing. And unfortunately, we kept on using that language. We kept on, I believe, being gaslit by government. We had people like Gavin Williamson telling us it would be the biggest injection of energy and cash that the country had seen since 1945 to repair the damage to schools. And in the end, that proved absolutely hollow.
So am I right in thinking that what you mean by that is that even if they had embarked upon a Marshall Plan for education and children, it was still the wrong idea, that you could inflict hurt and then fix it?
Yeah. I mean, we shouldn't be thinking of children as, beings that it is OK to harm if we can fix them afterwards. That is, any parent would take issue with that. Imagine if I said that about your children. Imagine if someone said it about mine. I would, get very angry.
What is some of the up-to-date data telling us now? I mean, you've always been across the numbers. What is it saying 3-4 years later that we can understand about the consequences?
Yeah, so look, I'm going to give you a few headline figures and then I'm going to caveat it, but let me just give you a feel first. And one of the issues here is there is so much data, it is almost hard to know where to begin. Some of the most shocking data, I think, is around what we've done to the school system. So we still have, 4 years after the original school closures, 4 years this week pretty much, or coming up to it, we now have 1 in 10 pupils who are persistently absent from school. That is a marked increase on numbers before the pandemic. And, who knows if that will ever recover? It isn't so far. 1 in 5 children, so almost 2 million children across the country, are not meeting speech and language milestones. I think that's an incredibly grim figure. Speaks particularly to younger children, but of course that kind of deficit sticks with children through their whole lives. And I think the other, awful figure is we have 200 children a year now who are committing suicide. That's 4 school kids a week committing suicide. That's horrific. The caveat to that, however, Neil, is that a lot of these issues did exist before the pandemic. So, if you take a slightly longer view and look at the figures, certainly from 2000, perhaps even 2010, you will see that the rates of decline in children's physical and particularly mental well-being were already there. So this trajectory in some ways has got worse, but probably maybe not caused by the pandemic itself.
I mentioned this with Dr. Claire Craig as well, but this idea that the government were consistently saying that, well, we can't help this. We're in a situation of such danger, such significance that, well, the children are just going to have to take this and then we can move on. How do you respond to that feeling that, in a strange way, the buck seemed to stop at children, which seemed like the inversion of where the pyramid of responsibility ought to have been?
Absolutely inversion. I mean, it's something we talk about a lot actually in our first book, The Children's Inquiry, this idea that we have inverted the natural order, the natural morality of things. Adults are meant to protect children. As to the specific point, we had no choice. Of course they had a choice. It was a policy choice. And they knew, and we knew from April 2020, that COVID was a very discriminatory virus. That is the sad reality. It did not hugely impact the vast majority of children. It was never going to. It was very dangerous for some adults. I think that is now a given. We were never told that at the time, were we? And it might comfort senior policymakers to tell themselves, just as they told us at the time, there was no choice, but there was a choice. And you know what I would say, Neil? I would say that even were COVID a serious risk to children, you would have to take action through the lens of what was needed to protect the children. That may have meant closing some schools, may not have done. A way of protecting children that didn't inflict such grotesque, really, sort of pain on them. Clearly, that's what we should have aspired to do as a society, and that just never happened.
It just never happened, you're right.